All right, let's dive right in. Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Ben Conway. I'm the co-founder and COO of VNTANA. And today we're going to be talking about maximizing your 3D investment through selling on B2B, e-commerce, Metaverse, NFTs, and beyond. So for a little background on VNTANA, for those of you who don't know, we describe ourselves as a 3D infrastructure platform. And so what that means is that we can add 3D capabilities throughout the entire life cycle of your product, from initial design and back and forth between 2D and 3D designers, to development, to internal reviews, assortment planning, all the way through to go-to-market, which is where we're going to focus today. And the way that we're able to enable this technology across the entire product lifecycle is through our patented optimization algorithms, which can reduce 3D file sizes by up to 99% while still maintaining super high visual fidelity. So this allows users to load really light, really quick models on desktop, mobile, AR, digital showrooms, all sorts of different places. So that'll be kind of the last plug on us for this. Happy to answer any questions about us or anything I talk about later on. But let's dive into some housekeeping. So we will be sending a recording and slides of today's webinar. Afterwards, feel free to share that internally or with a friend if you think it'll be useful. Any questions you have, we'll be addressing those at the end, unless Richard bumps me and says this is super important. And Richard's our head of marketing who's on the call right now and says we need to answer right now. We'll answer all those at the end. And if you need any assistance with Zoom, just use the chat function and Richard would be more than happy to help. All right. So the agenda for today. First, we're going to talk about some basic considerations for 3D selling. So I want to talk about how can you ensure that you're going to be successful when you're selling using 3D, and what do you need to do to make sure that you're actually able to scale it? Because I think that's a super overlooked part of selling in 3D. Then we're going to go over B2B sales and how you can use this in a B2B context. And that's probably where we're actually going to spend the most amount of time today, because that's where we're seeing our customers get the most value out of 3D today. Next, we'll dive into e-commerce. And then finally, we'll get into NFTs and metaverse experiences. So some basic considerations for 3D selling. Diagram your end-to-end workflow early on. I cannot stress how important this is and how often it's overlooked. A lot of times the way that we're seeing 3D come down is through an e-com team or a marketing team's like, we want to try this thing in 3D. And we highly recommend testing and trying things out. We're totally okay with that. But the issue is people put the cart before the horse and they miss out on all of these gaps that might exist. So they start setting up processes that are only going to be effective for a single channel. And that can be really, really problematic. So I think it's very helpful to go from even starting at the raw material stage. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Like, okay, we've got our raw materials. We're going to scan those raw materials. Then we've got back and forth between our designers. Like I'm talking about the entire thing that happens all the way before you actually get into go-to-market, which is the last phase of the product lifecycle. So diagramming that will help identify any gaps, any current processes that might be lacking. Oh, wait, this doesn't scale. Oh, wait, this person needs a different sort of file format. Do we have all the data from PLM associated with this 3D asset to put somewhere else? There are lots of questions that come up when you're diagramming this. This also helps you see like, all right, we're going to be using VibeIQ, and then we're going to be using Jor for wholesale, and then we're going to use it on e-com, and then also someone from Meta reached out to us, and we want to test this on Instagram, or we want to test it on Snapchat. What you're going to realize is that when you dig into that a little bit more, there's different specifications that are required for each step of the process. And so more than just like, oh, this might change everything, it might make you quickly realize we might have to bite this off in smaller chunks. And let's try it here, and then we can try it there. So I highly recommend diagramming your end-to-end workflow before you even start looking into selling 3D. That's something we can help you with. That's something other partners like Calypso can help you with, but I think it's immensely important as you're looking to scale up. The next thing that is really important is, what does success look like? We have been a part of multiple tests in the past where there were different ideas of what success looked like. Oftentimes you got your digital product creation team that's involved in the process, and they might have a certain idea of like, I think this would be successful. This is so cool. We created this in 3D. It's live on e-commerce. Isn't this amazing? And then you've got your e-commerce team that's like, Well, we're really focused on increasing conversions, or we really want to drive higher engagement if it's maybe a luxury product because you don't get that many conversions on e-commerce. Like whatever that is, you need to make sure that both of the teams are aligned, and then you need to make sure you have all of the proper tracking mechanisms in place. Is that data linked up? Are we able to track through our site the conversion rates? Is the partner we're working with able to give us the data that we want out of this? How are we going to gauge success for this? And then do we even have the tools to do that? And I know some of this stuff seems really basic, but I've been a part of enough pilots at this point where that hasn't actually happened, that I think it's very worthwhile to point out. So those are all things that you should be thinking about before you actually even dive into selling in 3D. The next thing that you should be thinking about is, okay, we've diagrammed where we want to sell it. We know these channels. We know what we want to track. Now we need to think a little bit more about like, what are the raw inputs we need to get there? So one of the limitations that might come up is a lot of the avenues when you're talking about 3D selling, I'm talking about real-time 3D. I'm talking about an interactive 3D model. I'm not talking about renders like this render that I've got on the side of the screen. I'm talking about real-time interactive 3D. And there's some limitations around that. If you are someone who sells fur, who's got fur on products, that's not going to work in real-time applications right now. If you've got lots of velvet, lots of Sherpa, that's going to be a problem. Displacement maps, let's save. It's not a deal breaker by any means, but it is something you need to take a little bit more consideration in when you're using it. I know a lot of knits use displacement maps in their 3D models, but all of these things that are things that you should think about, because what'll happen is, and we've seen this again happen, is like, okay, we're ready to do 3D and they've got scans of boots, for instance, and the boots have fur, and the reality, they just don't look good. They don't look the way that they should. But the problem is they already got the ecom team to sign off on this test, and they hadn't really thought about the fact that, oh, this is actually going in a real-time environment. And so now it's not going to look the way that it should or won't work at all. So that's really important to think about. What product are we going to try and test out? There are new, they call them extensions for GLTF. There are new capabilities, let's say, for real-time rendering for these different types of materials that are coming out all the time, but it's something you should think about before you get started. Another thing you need to think about is the different platforms are going to have different specs. It is not a one-size-fits-all by any means. Snapchat's cool with 2K textures. Meta wants 1K textures. Some people are fine with your export from Browseware, where you've got a single material per UV, or a single UV per pattern piece, basically. Others are like, no, this all needs to be in a 0 to 1 UV space. And so those are all things that you need to think about before you go into selling in 3D. And again, they're all things that are very doable, but they need to be thought about, because what'll happen is you might prep a bunch of files with the idea that you're going to be able to use them in all these different places. But if you don't gather those specifications ahead of time, it's going to cause a lot of problems and a lot of headache for you. POCs and implementations fail when not properly planned or tested. This kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier about, do we have the analytics in place? Do both teams know what they want to test? And then did we pick the right product to test? Something else to note is just generally, a 3D viewer doesn't cut it. Just because you have a 3D model and you have a 3D viewer, to think that you're doing a proper test is really not accurate. That'd be akin to saying, we're going to upload a video and we're going to use the raw video that we had. The video is 500 megabytes large. We'll just let people load it on our ecom site. You would never do that. You're going to optimize all of your images. You're going to optimize all of your video files before they ever go live in a consumer-facing or buyer-facing role. The same is going to be true of 3D. Reducing file size, making sure that the textures are performant, which isn't just around file size. You want to make sure that the model's actually performant. So we'll work on a lot of devices. So not just the latest iPhone, not just the latest Google Pixel. That's always going to be an important consideration. And this is something I added right before this webinar, this last point, because I was just on a call with a client talking about it. And I think it's really, really important. And I think that people don't think about it enough, is how important your material libraries are to get right early on in the process. If you do not standardize your material libraries, if you do not think that about all of the places that this file might ultimately live, if you are only focused on renders, you are going to be kicking yourself later on. And the reason is, you're going to have to go back and rework the materials, or you're going to have to rework them within the program, or you're going to export them and then rework that 3D model to adjust the materials to get it ready. If you standardize ahead of time, and when I say standardize, what I mean is, as much as is possible without materials like fur, you want to make sure that your materials follow PBR spec for GLTF. You can write this down. I'll maybe include it in the email that we send out, Richard, as a note for the recap. PBR spec using the metallic roughness workflow. Those materials will be ready to go for pretty much anywhere that you want to use them, and they'll still look great for renders. It's not like going to take anything away from your rendering capabilities. Oftentimes, if you can get your materials in PBR spec with metallic roughness workflows, you will be set up for success when it comes to selling 3D down the road. Adobe Substance Sampler, we don't have any relationship with them. I'm just letting you know it's an amazing tool. Take a look at it. We're recommending it to clients. It can really enhance your materials and will help you with that standardization process, including scans, including existing scans that you have. All right. This is now live on our website. We might make a few adjustments to this based on some feedback, but the reason that I'm sharing this, and it was included in the deck, is like, I want you to be thinking about all the places that 3D might be used and what is it really, we're talking about selling, we're talking about maximizing your investment. So that's really just the right side of this, but there's a lot of considerations along the way, and there's a lot of ways you can kind of optimize that process so you can get to the selling part a lot faster. All right. Metaverse and NFTs, everybody's favorite or least favorite topic. And I am going to try and give you the most honest assessment that I can about this topic. We get asked about it on a daily basis. A lot of people are super interested. There's an enormous amount of noise and an enormous amount of hype. And so let me talk to you about what's possible and what's not possible. All right. And this is actually going to be a pretty short slide presentation here, because I've got a lot to say, but there's not a lot to show, because the metaverse is early. The metaverse is early. The metaverse is undefined. And frankly, everyone is trying to jump on the bandwagon, either for investment purposes or for hype purposes, to talk about how they're a metaverse ready company. We're doing things. We absolutely think there are possibilities for the metaverse and ways that products can be sold in a fully digital fashion. But the reality is the metaverse didn't happen overnight. There isn't something, the metaverse didn't just turn on once Meta said, our name is now Meta, it is no longer Facebook. The metaverse today is really a lot of technologies that have already existed. Fortnite has been around for years. Now Fortnite is lumped into the metaverse. That's because the metaverse is kind of this new topic that came out, but Fortnite already existed. Roblox already existed. The reality is, for anything that actually has scale, that's where you're going to want to focus. You might hear about Sandbox Metaverse. You might hear about Decentraland. We've had customers that are like, I want to get my files into Decentraland. Decentraland currently has 998 daily active users. Less traffic than every single person on here's e-commerce size has. There are not a lot of people that are there. The performance is really not there. And then the quality of models that can be delivered there is usually relatively low. There's some stuff that can look okay. I'm not trying to knock them. I'm not trying to knock anyone with this. I'm just trying to give a realistic assessment of where this stuff is today. There aren't a lot of your customers that exist in the metaverse. And the other thing is, metaverses, if you want to call them that, are not really interoperable. So when you pick it, you're not like, we're getting ready for the metaverse. In reality, you're getting ready for a specific channel in the same way you would for, probably even more specifically than anything else. Because if you look at, like, we're going to pull all our 3D assets into Fortnite. Epic Games is doing an amazing job of trying to make this more accessible. They're starting to build tools that are going to allow brands to skin avatars that are going to be sold in Fortnite. The reality is there's going to probably have to be some stylization there that happens. They're not just going to take the way that the garment that you're showing your buyer, the garment that you're showing your e-commerce customer is probably going to look a little bit different in Fortnite. But Epic is working on tools to make that happen. Roblox is working on tools to make that happen. They want your content there. And if I were going to put my content there, or if I was going to put my content in the metaverse, that's where I would focus. So I guess what I have to say is that things are super, super early. Roblox and Fortnite are probably the areas that you actually want to be in. That's where users are. That's where things are actually being monetized. Again, it's going to be some effort. It's nothing's at the point of automation yet. But that's where you're going to want to spend your time. Scale still matters to be effective. That has to go back with what I was saying about Decentraland or Sandbox. There's just not a lot of users there on a daily basis. And so it's a lot of effort for honestly not a huge return at this point in time. Video games, are basically kind of the metaverse now. So I think that's actually going to be an area of growth that happens faster, is what people have just considered traditional video games, where you're interacting with other players or you're buying unlocks for avatars, skinning cars, whatever it is, whatever collaborations are going to come up. We've already seen it happen with like Pokemon Go has done a good job of this. They've done stuff with like Gucci and North Face, and it was super successful. And they ended up selling physical product, not just NFTs, but they sold physical product as a result of the collaboration. And they had branded product that worked with the collaboration. And I still think that's the right mindset today. So I also think we're going to see an uptick towards like 3D ads existing. Right now, there are ads in video games, but they're frankly mostly 2D. It's like like a billboard, like Grand Theft Auto, you're driving in a city or something like that. You might see a Coca-Cola billboard that's ad sponsored and is a programmatic ad, or you might see a video, like a video in Times Square, if that's part of the game, for instance. I think we're going to start seeing 3D assets make their way into video games and be more accessible. My final note about the metaverse content: the file size requirements are really, really tiny. They're tiny to the point where if you're doing it manually, if you're doing it automatically, you're losing quality. It's impossible not to lose quality at a file size that's required for this. So it can be okay, but what you're going to get is a stripped down version, a dumbed down version of your product. And so you need to know that going into it, and you need to be okay with it. If the expectation from executives who might see this hype and might be asking you questions and might want to get involved in it is that it's going to look the same, it's not going to. So you should know that and be ready to answer that question. All right. So final thing, NFTs. I'm not going to say a lot about whether or not they're valuable today. They're things that brands might be looking into. Absolutely more than welcome to. What I'm just going to show you today is how you can easily take an asset that lives on VNTANA. It could be any asset, but take an asset and create an NFT on it on OpenSea, which is the biggest NFT platform. Alrighty. So one of the first things that you are going to need to do to create an account on OpenSea, you need to have a crypto wallet. There's a couple options out there. The one that everyone seems to be using is a wallet called MetaMask. You don't actually have to have money in there, but you do have to create the account. The way that I found, I've got a Chrome extension, so usually I have to have an extension that's downloaded to be a part of it. The way that I found was the fastest was actually to use my mobile device. So download OpenSea on your iOS device, download MetaMask, and it makes it easier to link them up. So that's step one that you're going to have to do. But then let's look at actually like creating an NFT. So to create a new item, all you really need to do is drag and drop a 3D model into here. Now, the issue is it's a 3D web viewer. There isn't anything, it's getting minted on the blockchain for whatever that's worth. But the reality is it's just displaying a GLB file, and it's just displaying a JPEG file. So that's why you see so much plagiarism, is because there are formats that are open that people can take stuff from. So it's not like this is an encrypted file that gets displayed on your device. It's actually just a GLB file. So when you're creating an NFT, though, things that you're going to want to consider are, because it's being minted on the blockchain, which essentially means that the file is being distributed across the blockchain. So imagine breaking it up into a bunch of bytes and storing it all throughout the decentralized devices. The larger the file, the longer it's going to take, the more of a pain in the ass it's going to be. Pardon my French. And then the other issue is that it's going to slow down load time. So in the same way that it slows down load time for e-commerce, it's going to slow down load times here. So let me jump over to the VNTANA platform. All right. So here I've got this, VNTANA hoodie that we created. So if I'm here, all I'm going to do, come here, download my GLB file. That's what everyone's going to want for NFTs. I've got it right here. All I have to do is drag and drop that file directly into there. We'll call it VNTANA hoodie. You could add a link back to your site. Let's say you were selling this. There's a product detail page. You could add descriptions. Here's the collection. You set up different collections on NFT or on OpenSea. You only can have a certain number of collections. It's kind of just a group of assets like you would when people talk about drops. It's collections the same way you have collections in fashion. And then you can choose what blockchain you want it to be minted on. I'm going to leave it on Ethereum. I don't have a preference. Ethereum's the default for a reason. But if you wanted to do something different, you could do that. And then you simply click create, and you have a 3D NFT. And it's as simple as that. So I'm going to jump ahead to the example that I already had because I created this earlier. I'm not going to wait for it to be minted. And you have a 3D asset that loads quickly because it's been optimized. And now that's ready to be an NFT. So it really is that simple. If your company wants to get in NFTs, if you want to try it, basically upload the asset to VNTANA. We'll convert it to a GLB. We'll optimize it. You download it and you upload it to the NFT platform and you click create and it'll be minted on the blockchain and ready to go.